Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was in Scooby Doo. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. Part 1, The Tear in the Sky. The air over Muzudafu tasted like ozone and burned asphalt. It was a familiar taste to Izuku Midoriya, one that usually signaled that things had gone terribly, catastrophically wrong. Detroit. Smash! The shout tore from Izuku's throat, raw and desperate. Green lightning arced off his body, crackling violently against the dark clouds gathering overhead. The force of the impact was enough to shatter the windows of the surrounding warehouse district, sending shards of glass raining down like jagged confetti. But the villain standing, or rather, hovering, before him didn't flinch. The villain, known only by the code name Riftwalker, was an anomaly. He was a man wrapped in what looked like shifting oil, his form unstable, flickering in and out of existence. His quirk, dimensional shear, allowed him to fold space like origami, turning a straight line into a labyrinth and a punch into a gentle breeze. Predicted, Riftwalker droned, his voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. Your trajectory is linear. Your power is immense, boy, but you lack imagination. Izuku landed in a crouch, his iron soles grinding against the concrete. Steam hissed from his skin. Think, he commanded himself, his eyes darting around the battlefield. He's opening portals to redirect my kinetic energy. Every time I hit him, the force is displaced into the ground, or the air behind me. I can't punch him. I have to punch the space where he isn't going to be. Deku! Watch your six! The voice of Katsuki Bakugo crackled over the comms earpiece, though it was barely audible over the roar of the wind. Izuku didn't look back. Danger Sense, the fourth user's quirk, stabbed into the base of his skull like a hot needle. He didn't need to see the attack to feel it. He engaged Black Whip, 6 tendrils of dark energy exploding from his back and latching onto a nearby lamppost. With a violent yank, he hauled himself sideways just as the space where he had been standing imploded, vanishing into a swirling void of purple nothingness. That was close, Izuku muttered, sweat stinging his eyes. Too close. If that hits me, I don't just get hurt. I get erased. You're fast, Riftwalker noted, tilting his head. The oily substance covering his face swirled to mimic a smile. But you're fighting a losing battle. My employer wants the one-for-all quirk, but if I can't extract it, I suppose burying it in a dimension of static will suffice. Izuku grit his teeth. He channeled one for all at 45%. The power hummed through his veins, a familiar, comforting river of energy that felt like the collective will of 8 ghosts pushing him forward. He couldn't let this villain escape. The data Riftwalker had stolen from the Hero Public Safety Commission was too dangerous. I need to be faster. Faster than he can think. Faster than he can fold space. Bakugo, Shuto. Flank him. Izuku yelled into the comms. I'm going to draw his fire. Don't tell me what to do, nerd! Came the explosive reply, followed by the distant boom of nitroglycerin. Izuku launched himself forward. He wasn't aiming for the villain this time. He was aiming for the environment. He utilized FA Gene, building up kinetic energy with every rapid movement, bouncing off the warehouse walls like a pinball. First gear. Second gear. Third. He was a blur of green and black. Riftwalker's head snapped back and forth, trying to track the boy. Useless! The villain shouted, raising his hands. The air around him began to warp, reality bubbling like boiling water. Spatial collapse. A dome of purple energy expanded outward. Now, sixth. Smoke screen. A cloud of thick purple smoke exploded from Izuku's gauntlets, engulfing the entire street in an instant. The villain paused, his vision obscured. Izuku moved through the smoke, guided only by danger sense. He could feel the villain's intent, a sharp, cold spikes in his mind. He wound back his arm, the stored energy of FA Gene layering over the raw power of one for all. 100%. Fake it. He pulled his punch at the last second, letting the wind pressure do the work. The blast cleared the smoke in a violent tunnel, exposing the villain. Riftwalker panicked, opening a portal directly in front of him to catch the wind blast. But Izuku was already behind him. Float. Suspended in the air, Upside down, Izuku locked his legs around the villain's torso. Manchester smash. He drove his heels down, an axe kick fueled by gravity and power. It connected. For a split second, Riftwalker's concentration broke. His solid form materialized. The impact cracked the pavement below them, creating a crater 10 meters wide. But Riftwalker didn't fall unconscious. As his eyes rolled back, his quirk malfunctioned. No. The villain gasped, his body convulsing. Containment failed. The air didn't just tear, it shattered. A sound like 1,000 panes of glass breaking at once deafened Izuku. The purple portal the villain had tried to summon didn't close. Instead, it turned inside out, shifting from purple to a sickly, swirling kaleidoscope of neon green and orange. The suction was instantaneous. Debris, cars, and chunks of the warehouse were lifted into the air. Izuku, still gripping the villain, felt his weight become negligible. Deku! Uraraka's voice screamed over the comms. Let go of him, Deku! The Kugo roared. I can't! Izuku yelled back, the wind tearing the words from his mouth. If I let go, the singularity will expand. I have to hold it closed with Black Whip. He shot his tendrils out, anchoring himself to the ground, to buildings, to anything solid. But the ground was disintegrating. The physics of the world were bending. The villain, unconscious now, was being pulled into the vortex, and because Izuku was holding him, so was he. The pull was stronger than 100%. Stronger than anything All Might had ever described. It wasn't just pulling his body, it felt like it was pulling his soul. The anchor point snapped. I'm sorry, Izuku whispered, the realization hitting him. He looked back one last time. Through the swirling dust, he saw the blurry figures of his friends rushing toward him. Bakugo was flying, hand outstretched, terror written on his face for the first time in years. Izuku! The world twisted. The sky became the ground. The colors inverted. And then, there was silence. Part 2, the graveyard shift. The silence was the first thing he noticed. It wasn't the silence of a quiet room. It was the heavy, oppressive silence of a place that hadn't seen life in a very long time. Then came the pain. It hit him all at once, a freight train of agony slamming into every nerve ending. Izuku gasped, his eyes snapping open, but all he saw was a spinning canopy of dead, gnarled branches against a dark, foggy sky. He tried to sit up, but his body refused. His muscles seized, locking him in a rigid spasm. A groan escaped his lips, sounding wet and ragged. Where am I? He forced his head to turn. He wasn't on the pavement of the industrial district anymore. He was lying on cold, damp earth. The smell was different, too. Gone was the ozone and burning rubber. In its place was the scent of wet moss, decaying leaves, and old stone. Fog, thick and unnatural, curled around his boots. Kaken? He rasped. Uraraka? No answer. Just the mournful hoot of an owl somewhere in the distance. Izuku forced himself to breathe. Status report. Check your body. He wiggled his toes. Good. He flexed his fingers. They trembled, but they moved. He could feel the familiar burn of overused muscles, the backlash of using too high a percentage of one for all without proper bracing. His gamma suit was in tatters. The right sleeve was completely gone, his arm exposed to the chill night air. The iron soles of his boots were cracked. His mask, the bunny-eared cowl his mother had made, which he had upgraded so many times, hung loosely around his neck, one of the long ears sheared off completely. Slowly, agonizingly, Izuku pushed himself up. He was in a graveyard. But not a normal graveyard. It looked like something out of a picture book or a stylized movie. The tombstones were crooked and jagged, jutting out of the ground at odd angles. The trees were twisted into scary faces. The fog glowed with a faint, eerie luminescence. This isn't Japan, Izuku muttered, his analytical mind kicking into overdrive despite the concussion he surely had. The architecture of the mausoleums, it looks Western. Victorian Gothic revival? Or maybe colonial? He reached for his utility belt to check his GPS, but the device was dead. The screen was cracked, static dancing across the liquid crystal display. Riftwalker, he remembered suddenly. He spun around, ignoring the scream of protest from his ribs. Where is the villain? He scanned the immediate area. There was no sign of the oil-slicked man. There was no sign of the portal. Just a crater where Izuku had landed, crushing an unfortunate stone angel statue into dust. Green sparks flickered around Izuku's body, residual energy from one for all that he couldn't quite suppress. His control was slipping due to exhaustion. He glowed faintly in the mist, a specter of green lightning and battered cloth. He took a step and stumbled. The gravity felt slightly different. No, that wasn't it. The air felt lighter. The colors of the world, even in the dark, seemed saturated. The grass was too green. The shadows were too purple. Hello? He called out, his voice echoing strangely. Is anyone there? I need a hero. He stumbled past a mausoleum labeled Pepsi-Cola, which he blinked at in confusion. No, that was a hallucination. He looked again. It said Pepsicua? A weird name. He had to find civilization. He had to find the police. He had to warn them that a dimension-hopping villain might be loose in their jurisdiction. He trudged forward, clutching his side. Blood trickled down his forehead, matting his unruly green hair. He looked like a nightmare, a glowing, tattered figure emerging from the mist, eyes wide with panic and pain. Part 3, The Mystery Machine. Less than a mile away, on a lonely dirt road that wound through the woods, a van sat idling. It was a van that defied the aesthetic of the modern era. Painted in psychedelic swirls of turquoise, lime green, and orange, with bright orange flowers adorning the hubcaps, it was a vehicle that screamed adventure, or possibly hippie commune. Inside, the mood was tense, but mostly because of the radiator. Fred, I told you that shortcut through the creepy swamp was a bad idea, said a voice from the back. Velma Dinkley sat cross-legged on the plush orange bench, adjusting her thick, black-rimmed glasses. She was holding a map that looked like it had been printed in the 1950s, squinting at it under the dim dome light. It wasn't a bad idea, Velma, Fred Jones replied from the driver's seat. He adjusted his white ascot in the rearview mirror, checking his perfect blonde hair. It was a strategic detour. The map clearly said scenic route. Since when is Dead Man's Drop considered scenic? Daphne Blake asked. She was filing her nails in the passenger seat, her purple dress pristine despite the hours of travel. Besides, Freddie, the temperature gauge is in the red. Again, Fred tapped the dashboard. Just a glitch. The mystery machine is a tank. She can handle a little overheating. Hiss. Steam exploded from under the hood, enveloping the windshield in a white cloud. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died with a mournful wheeze. Silence filled the van. Zoinks, came a shaky voice from the very back. I think the tank just surrendered, Fred. Norville's Shaggy Rogers popped up from behind the back seat, clutching a bag of potato chips as if it were a lifeline. Beside him, a Great Dane of impossible proportions poked his head up. Ruro, the dog said. See? Velma sighed, closing her map. Overheated. We're miles from Coolsville, and it's pitch black outside. Fred sighed, the optimism never quite leaving his face. All right, gang. Let's not panic. I'll check the engine. We probably just need some water for the radiator. Water? Shaggy gulped. Like out there? In the spooky woods? Rhea, spooky, Scooby Doo agreed, his teeth chattering. Oh, come on, you two, Daphne said, opening her door. It's just a forest. It's not like it's haunted. As if on cue, a wolf howled. Thunder rumbled, though there were no clouds directly above them. You were saying? Shaggy whimpered. Fred hopped out and popped the hood. He waved the steam away. Yep. Bone dry. We need water. Is there a stream nearby on the map, Velma? Velma leaned out the window. According to this, there's an old well near the cemetery just up the hill. CC Cemetery? Shaggy shrieked. He grabbed Scooby, and the two of them vibrated in sync. No way, man. No way are we going to a boneyard in the middle of the night. We'll stay here and guard the snacks. Actually, Fred said, wiping grease from his hands with a rag, I need you two to go get the water. Daphne and Velma need to help me hold the flashlight and check the hoses. But Fred, would you do it for a Scooby snack? Daphne asked, holding up a box. Scooby and Shaggy paused. They looked at each other. They looked at the dark, terrifying woods. They looked back at the box. No, Shaggy said firmly. How about 2 Scooby snacks? Daphne bribed. Shaggy licked his lips. 3. And a box of chocolate-covered liver snaps for Scoob. River snaps! Scooby cheered. Deal, Fred said, tossing them a bucket. The cemetery is right up that path. Just grab water from the well and come right back. Don't go looking for ghosts. Looking for M? Shaggy muttered as he and Scooby climbed out of the van, trembling. Like, we're trying to avoid M. Come on, Scoob. Let's make this quick. In and out. Ninja stealth mode. They tiptoed toward the wrought iron gates of the graveyard, the fog swallowing them up. Part 4. The Green Goblin of the Gravestones. The graveyard was exactly as creepy as Shaggy had feared. Every shadow looked like a witch, and the wind whistling through the trees sounded like moaning spirits. Like, remind me again why we hang out with Fred. Shaggy whispered, clutching the empty bucket to his chest. Rude? Scooby suggested. Yeah, the food is good, Shaggy admitted. But is it worth the constant terror? I'm starting to think I'm developing an ulcer, Scoob. And not the good kind caused by too much jalapeno cheese. They reached the old stone well in the center of the graveyard. It was covered in vines and looked like the perfect place for a hand to reach out and grab an unsuspecting ankle. Okay, Scoob. You lower the bucket. I'll keep a lookout. Me? RWHY me? Because you have 4 legs. Better center of gravity. Go on. Scooby grumbled but took the bucket handle in his teeth. He leaned over the well, the winch creaking loudly in the silence. Crack. The sound of a twig snapping echoed like a gunshot. Shaggy jumped 3 feet into the air. Zoinks! What was that? Scooby dropped the bucket. It plummeted down the well, hitting the water with a distant splash. Did you hear that, Scoob? It sounded like footsteps. Rust-Rhi rhined. Scooby tried to rationalize, though his tail was tucked firmly between his legs. I don't think that was the wind, old buddy. Then they saw it. Through the thick fog, a green light began to pulse. It wasn't a flashlight. It was jagged, crackling energy, illuminating the silhouettes of the tombstones. And it was coming closer. Zzzt, zzzt. A low, pained moaning sound drifted toward them. Help, please, it's a ghost. Shaggy whispered, his knees knocking together so hard they made a rhythmic beat. A glowing green ghost. And it's got ears. Scooby whimpered, covering his eyes with his paws. Bunny ears. From the mist emerged Izuku Midoriya. To Shaggy and Scooby, however, this was not a teenage boy. This was a monster. His clothes were shredded ribbons flapping in a non-existent wind. His face was obscured by shadow and blood. Glowing green lightning danced across his skin, and his eyes, normally a warm green, were wide and dilated, glowing with the intensity of one for all. Izuku spotted them. 2 figures near a well. Civilians! Wait! Izuku called out, stumbling forward. He reached out a hand, black energy, black whip, accidentally flickering from his fingers due to his lack of control. You have to run! Danger! To Shaggy, it looked like the ghost was casting a curse. It's the Green Goblin ghost. And he's gonna turn us into soup! Shaggy screamed. Run, Scoob! Raya! Scooby yelped. The 2 of them scrambled, their legs spinning in place for a solid 3 seconds, creating a small trench in the dirt, before they found traction. They bolted in the opposite direction, abandoning the well, the water, and their dignity. Wait! Izuku cried, trying to follow. Please! I'm injured! I'm a hero! He tried to run, but his leg gave out. He fell forward, catching himself with his hands. The impact sent a shockwave of air pressure outward, blowing away the fog in a 20-foot radius and shattering a nearby vase of dead flowers. Shaggy looked back over his shoulder and saw the boy destroy a vase with a mere slap of the ground. He's got super strength. He's a poltergeist on steroids. Shaggy yelled. Keep running, Scoob! Don't look back. Izuku watched them go, his heart sinking. Why were they running? Was there something behind him? He whipped his head around, danger sense tingling faintly, but he saw nothing. They think I'm the villain, he realized with horror. I must look. Terrifying. He forced himself up again. He couldn't stay here. If Riftwalker was nearby, those civilians were in danger. He had to catch up to them. He had to protect them, one for all. Full cowling. 5%. The green lightning stabilized. Izuku gritted his teeth against the pain and dashed after them. Even at 5%, he moved faster than an Olympic sprinter. He blurred through the graveyard, leaping over tombstones. Part 5, Jinkies. Back at the mystery machine, Fred was successfully pouring the last of their bottled water supply into the radiator. That should hold us until we get to a gas station, Fred said, slamming the hood shut. Good work, team. Fred, we literally just held flashlights, Daphne pointed out. Vital work, Daph. Vital. Fred. Velma interrupted, pointing toward the graveyard gate. Look! Shaggy and Scooby were sprinting toward the van at speeds that defied physics. They weren't just running, they were galloping, arms flailing, eyes bugging out of their heads. Start the van! Start the van! Shaggy screamed. Open the door! Scooby howled. They dove into the back of the van, colliding with the bench and scrambling under the table, shivering so hard the entire vehicle shook. Whoa, hold on! Fred said, opening the driver's side door. What happened? Where's the water? Forget the water! Shaggy yelled from under the table. There's a monster! A glowing green ghoul! It's right behind us! A glowing green ghoul? Velma raised an eyebrow. Shaggy, are you sure it wasn't just a firefly and your overactive imagination? Fireflies don't shatter flower pots with their bare hands. Shaggy retorted. Rare he is. Scooby pointed a trembling paw out the back window. The gang looked. Emerging from the tree line was a figure. He was small, but he moved with incredible speed. He leaped over the graveyard gate, a 10-foot vertical jump, and landed in a crouch on the road. Fred blinked. Okay. That's impressive. The figure straightened up. The green glow faded slightly as he stopped moving. He raised his hands in a placating gesture. Please! The figure shouted. I'm not going to hurt you. Velma adjusted her glasses, squinting. Wait. That's not a costume. Look at the fabric tears. Look at the blood. Blood? Daphne gasped. He's hurt. Fred's leader instincts kicked in. Stand down, gang. I don't think that's a ghost. Fred stepped out of the van, holding his hands up. Hey! You there? Are you okay? Izuku stumbled toward them. He saw the group, a tall blonde man, 2 women, and the 2 terrified civilians from before. And a dog? Izuku panted, clutching his ribs. I am a hero from Yue High School. Designation. Deku. He took another step, and the world tilted sideways. The adrenaline wore off. The blood loss caught up to him. Watch out! Daphne cried, rushing forward. Izuku's vision tunneled. The last thing he saw was the girl with the purple headband reaching out to catch him, and the guy in the ascot rushing to help. Villain! Izuku murmured, his voice barely a whisper. Dimensional breach. Careful. And then, he collapsed. Part 6. Analysis of an anomaly. Daphne caught him, but the weight of the boy surprised her. He was dense, solid muscle beneath the tattered green suit. Fred was there a second later, taking the boy's weight easily. I've got him, Fred said, lowering Izuku gently onto the grass beside the road. Jinkies, Velma said, kneeling beside them. She pulled out a small first aid kit from her skirt pocket. She always carried one. He's been through a war zone. Look at these burns. And these lacerations. Is he dead? Shaggy asked, peeking out from the van door. No, Velma said, pressing 2 fingers to Izuku's neck. Pulse is strong. Actually, it's really strong. Like, barely human strong. But he's unconscious. He said he was a hero, Daphne noted, using a handkerchief to wipe the blood from Izuku's forehead. Beneath the grime, she saw a young face, freckled and pained. He looks like he's still in high school. He said Yue High School, Fred recalled. Never heard of it. Is it a local school? Velma examined the boy's costume. She fingered the material of his gloves. This fabric, it's advanced. Kevlar weave, but lighter. And these iron soles on his boots. This isn't a Halloween costume, Fred. This is tactical gear. Tactical gear? Shaggy gulped, finally stepping out of the van. So, like, he's a spy? Or an alien? Raelian? Scooby asked. He called himself Deku, Velma mused. And he mentioned a dimensional breach. That's specific. Fred looked down at the boy. He saw the scars on the boy's arms. Old, jagged scars that looked like he'd shattered his bones a dozen times over. Fred felt a strange pang of respect. He didn't know who this kid was, but he was a fighter. We can't leave him here, Fred stated firmly. He needs a hospital. Or at least a bed and some bandages. Take him to the hospital? Shaggy asked. But Fred, look at him. He glows. If we take him to the cops, they'll lock him up in Area 51. Velma paused. Shaggy had a point. If this boy really was something unnatural, the authorities in Coolsville might not react kindly. The town was used to guys in rubber masks, not glowing teenagers who could jump 10-foot gates. Shaggy's right, Velma said quietly. Until we know what's going on, and until he wakes up to explain it, we should keep him with us. We can patch him up at the clubhouse. The clubhouse? Daphne asked. You mean the garage? It's a headquarters, Daphne, Fred corrected. He scooped Izuku up in his arms. The boy's head lolled back. Okay, gang. Load up. We've got a new mystery. And this one doesn't seem to be wearing a mask. They shuffled back into the mystery machine. Fred laid Izuku on the back bench, resting his head on a cushion. Scooby sniffed the boy's boots curiously, then licked his hand. He smells electric, Shaggy observed, sitting as far away as possible while still being in the van. Like a toaster that's been plugged in too long. Let's just get him to safety, Daphne said, looking at the boy with concern. Fred turned the key. The engine roared to life, the water having done the trick. He threw the van into gear, and the mystery machine peeled out, leaving the foggy graveyard behind. As they drove off, none of them noticed the dark, oily substance dripping from the sole of Izuku's boot. It hit the floor of the van, sizzled, and then evaporated into a tiny, purple wisp of smoke. Part 7, Waking Up. It felt like hours, or maybe days, but it had only been 40 minutes. Izuku floated in a void. He saw vestiges of the past users of One for All. First user, you are far from home. 9th, Nana Shimura, be careful, Izuku. The rules of this world are different. Banjo, whoa! Check out the colors here. Funky, wake up, a voice whispered. Not a vestige. A real voice. Izuku gasped, shooting upright. Whoa, easy there, Tiger. Hands pushed him back down gently. Izuku blinked, his vision clearing. He wasn't in the graveyard anymore. He was lying on an old, comfortable couch covered in a patchwork quilt. The room smelled of motor oil, old books, and pizza? He looked around. It was a garage, but converted into a living space. There were posters of bands on the walls, stacks of scientific equipment on a desk, and trap blueprints pinned to a corkboard. Standing over him were the 4 people from the road. The blonde man, Fred, was holding an ice pack. The girl with glasses, Velma, was holding a notepad. The girl with red hair, Daphne, was holding a mug of tea. The scruffy guy, Shaggy, and the Great Dane, Scooby, were hiding behind the blonde man. Where? Izuku started, his voice cracking. He switched to English, grateful he had studied hard under President Mike. Where am I? What district is this? You're in Coolsville, Daphne said softly, offering the tea. Here, drink this. It's chamomile. It'll help with the shock. Izuku took the mug with trembling hands. Coolsville? Is that near Tokyo? The gang exchanged glances. Tokyo? Shaggy whispered. Man, he's really lost. That's like, across the ocean. You're in the United States, Velma said, observing him closely. Specifically Ohio. Ohio? Izuku nearly dropped the mug. The U.S.? But I was just in Japan. The fight, the portal. He looked down at his chest. His costume had been removed, leaving him in his gym shorts and undershirt, and his wounds were expertly bandaged. My gear! Izuku panicked. It's right there, Fred pointed to a workbench. We tried to stitch up the green suit, but the material is tough. I've never seen fiber weave like that. Izuku relaxed slightly. They hadn't stolen his support items. Thank you? You saved me. We just gave you a lift, Fred said modestly. I'm Fred. This is Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby Doo. Rello, Scooby said, waving a paw. Izuku's eyes widened. The dog spoke. Yeah, he does that, Shaggy shrugged. Don't worry, he doesn't bite. Unless you're a ham sandwich. Izuku stared. In his world, animals with quirks existed, like Principal Nizu, but they were rare. Was this dog a pro-hero? Is he, the principal? Izuku asked seriously. Principal? Shaggy laughed. Like, Scoob barely graduated obedience school. Izuku, Velma interrupted, her tone serious. You mentioned a dimensional breach before you passed out. And we saw you glow. Literally glow. And jump a 10-foot gate. She leaned in, her glasses reflecting the light. We solve mysteries, Izuku. Usually, the answer is a guy in a sheet with a projector. But you're not a guy in a sheet. What are you? Izuku looked at them. They were civilians. They had no idea about quirks. If he told them, would they fear him? The secrecy of one for all was paramount. But, he was stranded. He had no support, and these people had helped him. He looked at their faces. They were curious, yes, but not malicious. There was a kindness in their eyes that reminded him of his classmates at UA. He took a deep breath. Izuku started. I come from a society where 80% of the population possesses a superpower called a quirk. I am a hero in training. I was fighting a villain who could warp space, and I fell through. Silence filled the garage. Shaggy blinked. So, you're a superhero? I'm trying to be, Izuku said humble. Like Superman? Fred asked. All might is better, Izuku said instinctively. Velma dropped her notepad. Parallel dimension theory. Multiverse hypothesis. Biological evolution diverging on a planetary scale. She started pacing, muttering rapidly, almost as fast as Izuku usually did. This explains the density of his muscle fibers. The energy discharge. The iron sols. She spun around, grinning maniacally. Jinkies. This is the greatest mystery of the century. Izuku's sweat dropped. She reminded him of May Hatsum. That was concerning. Can you show us? Daphne asked hesitantly. The power? Izuku hesitated. It's dangerous. I don't want to break your house. Just a little bit. Shaggy asked, peering over Fred's shoulder. Like maybe just light up like a night light? It was kinda cool. Scary but cool. Izuku nodded slowly. He focused. He didn't need to move. He just let the energy flow, one for all. 5%. Green lightning crackled around his body. The air pressure in the room shifted. His hair floated slightly. The mug in his hand didn't break, showing his control. Zoinks, Shaggy whispered. Amazing, Fred breathed. Fascinating, Velma said, scribbling furiously. Scooby Doo crept forward and sniffed the lightning. A spark zapped his nose. Rips! Scooby jumped back, sneezing. Izuku powered down, the light fading. That is... One for all, Fred repeated. He crossed his arms, a smile spreading across his face. Well, Izuku. It looks like you're stuck here for a while. And Mystery Incorporated never leaves a friend behind. Friend? Izuku blinked. You like mysteries? Daphne asked. I like analyzing situations, Izuku admitted. Perfect. Fred clapped a hand on Izuku's shoulder, gently. Welcome to the gang, Deku. We'll help you find a way home. But until then, how do you feel about traps? Izuku smiled, a genuine, teary-eyed smile. I like that. Suddenly, the phone on the wall rang. A rotary phone. Fred walked over and picked it up. Mystery. Yes? The malt shop? A slime monster? Right. We're on it. He hung up and turned to the group. Looks like training starts now, Deku, Fred grinned. We've got a mystery to solve. Izuku stood up, wincing slightly but ignoring the pain. He walked over to his tattered costume. He tied the mask, now with only one ear, around his neck like a scarf. I'm ready, Izuku said, his eyes burning with determination. Like, can we eat first? Shaggy asked. Scooby snack? Daphne offered. Izuku looked at the dog treat. Then at the dog. Then at Shaggy. Sure, Izuku said. I could eat. As they walked toward the van, Izuku looked up at the night sky. The stars were different. The moon was a little too large, but as he walked alongside the cowardly dog and the lanky beatnik, the smart girl and the trap-obsessed leader and the fashionista, he felt a strange sense of calm. He was lost. He was hurt. But he wasn't alone, and for a hero, that made all the difference. Scooby-Doo! The dog cheered, jumping into the back of the van. Go beyond, Izuku whispered to himself, stepping into the mystery machine. Plus Ultra. Part 1, Vital Signs and Vinegar. The morning sun filtered through the dusty, high windows of the converted garage, casting long beams of light across the concrete floor. Dust motes danced in the air, swirling in patterns that reminded Izuku Midoriya of the chaotic energy of a battlefield. But the silence that hung in the room was peaceful, broken only by the rhythmic sound of scratching. Scritch, scratch, scritch. Izuku opened his eyes. The ceiling was unfamiliar, exposed wooden beams, oil stains, and a hanging tire swing. For a split second, panic flared in his chest. Where am I? The hospital? Recovery girl's office? Then the memories of the previous night crashed down on him. The portal. The graveyard. The talking dog. He tried to sit up, but a firm hand pushed him back down. Hold still, a female voice commanded. I'm trying to calibrate the bioreadings, and your shivering is throwing off the baseline. Izuku blinked, turning his head. Velma Dinkley was sitting on a stool next to the makeshift cot he was lying on. She was holding a magnifying glass in one hand and a complex-looking thermometer in the other. Her orange sweater was slightly wrinkled, suggesting she hadn't slept much. Velma-san? Izuku rasped. Just Velma, she corrected, not looking up from her notebook. And san is a Japanese honorific, right? I read a dissertation on Eastern linguistic socionorms last summer. Fascinating structure. She finally looked at him, adjusting her thick, square-rimmed glasses. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and brimming with a curiosity that rivaled the support course students at UA. How are you feeling, subject? I mean, Izuku? Sore, Izuku admitted. He took stock of his body. The deep ache in his bones from the overuse of One for All was still there, a dull throb in his arms and legs, but the sharp, stabbing pain of his lacerations had faded to a manageable sting. He looked down. His chest and arms were wrapped in fresh white bandages, applied with surprising professional skill. Did you treat me? Daphne and I did, Velma nodded. Fred helped with the heavy lifting. You have an accelerated healing factor, don't you? The cuts on your shoulder have already scabbed over. That's medically impossible for a normal human. It's not a healing factor quirk, Izuku murmured, his habit of muttering kicking in. It's likely just the residual activation of One for All boosting my metabolic rate, combined with the adrenaline crash. Although, Recovery Girl always said my body adapts quickly to trauma. Velma leaned in, her pen hovering over her notebook. Keep talking. One for All. You mentioned that last night. Is that the energy source? Is it radioactive? Solar-based? Izuku sat up slowly, clutching the blanket to his chest. He felt exposed, not just physically, but existentially. He was in a world that Velma had claimed was Ohio, but it felt like an alien planet. It's complicated, Izuku said. Velma, where are the others? Kitchen, she pointed a thumb over her shoulder toward a door leading into the main house. Shaggy and Scooby are making breakfast. Fred is waxing the van. Daphne went to the pharmacy to get more gauze. But we need to talk science, Izuku. She flipped her notebook open. It was filled with sketches of his costume, chemical formulas, and a drawing of his glowing state from the night before. I took a sample of your blood while you were out, Velma said matter-of-factly. You what? Izuku yelped, covering his arm. Relax, I used a sterile lancet. The results were confounding. Your white blood count is normal, but your cells seem to vibrate with a latent energy. And there's an extra joint in your pinky toe is missing. Usually, that indicates the next step in human evolution, but in your case, combined with the energy output. She trailed off, tapping her chin. You said you came from a place where 80% of people are like you. Not like me, Izuku corrected. Everyone has a unique power. A quirk. Some can breathe fire, some can float, some have engines in their legs. Mine is a power accumulation quirk. Velma stared at him. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant clatter of pots and pans. Izuku, she said gently, lowering the notebook. I believe that you believe that. And I saw the light show last night. I know you can do things that defy physics. But an entire society? With engines in their legs? It's true. Izuku insisted. I go to Yui High School. It's the top hero academy in Japan. Velma sighed, snapping her book shut. Look, we deal with a lot of strange things. We've seen swamp ghouls, snow ghosts, and haunted armors. But usually, there's a projector, a mirror, or some phosphorescent paint involved. You're the first, genuine anomaly I've encountered. But let's keep the superhero society talk to a minimum around the locals, okay? People in schools will get jittery enough about guys in rubber masks. If you tell them you're a super soldier from a dimension of mutants, the National Guard will be here before lunch. Izuku slumped. She didn't fully believe him. She accepted his power as a scientific oddity, but the context, the world of heroes and villains, was too far outside her paradigm. Okay, Izuku whispered. I understand. Low profile. Good, Velma smiled, her demeanor softening. Now, let's go get some food. Shaggy's making his morning after a mystery special. You'll need the calories. Part 2, the Ultra Super Shaggy Sandwich. The kitchen of the house, which apparently belonged to Shaggy's family, though his parents were conveniently absent, was a riot of colors. Bright yellow wallpaper, checkered floors, and appliances that looked like they were from a 1960s catalog. The smell, however, was divine. It was the scent of frying bacon, toasted bread, melting cheese, and spices that Izuku couldn't identify. Like, make way for the master chef! Shaggy Rogers proclaimed. He was standing by the stove, flipping pancakes with one hand and whisking eggs with the other. He wore a loose green V-neck t-shirt and brown bell-bottoms. Beside him, standing on his hind legs and wearing a chef's hat, was Scooby Doo. Roared her up! Scooby barked, sliding a plate across the counter. Fred Jones was sitting at the round kitchen table, reading a newspaper titled The Coolsville Daily. He looked up as Izuku and Velma entered. Hey! Sleeping Beauty is awake! Fred grinned, his teeth blindingly white. How's the arm, champ? It's better, thank you, Fred-san. Izuku bowed slightly. Just Fred, the blond boy chuckled. Sit down. You look like you could eat a horse. No offense, Scoob. Known Raken, Scooby mumbled, eyeing a sausage link. Izuku sat down. He was, in fact, starving. Using one for all at high percentages burned through his calorie reserves instantly. I actually require a high-calorie diet to maintain my quirk usage, Izuku explained seriously. Usually around 5,000 calories a day during training. Shaggy froze. He slowly turned around, a look of pure reverence on his face. 5,000? Shaggy whispered. Is he the one? Scooby asked in a hushed tone. Finally, Shaggy wiped a tear from his eye. Someone who understands the struggle. Scoob, break out the reserve supplies. We're making the magnum opus. Right on. What followed was a display of culinary architecture that defied the laws of physics as much as Izuku's superpowers did. Shaggy and Scooby moved in a blur. Bread, ham, cheese, lettuce, tomato, roast beef, turkey, marshmallows, chocolate syrup, pickles, hot fudge, and an entire roasted chicken were stacked with impossible balance. The resulting sandwich was nearly 3 feet tall. Shaggy slammed the monstrosity onto a plate and slid it in front of Izuku. The sandwich wobbled but did not fall. The Ultra Super Shaggy Sandwich, Shaggy announced proudly. With a side of Scooby snacks. Izuku stared at the tower of food. His analytical mind tried to calculate the nutritional value. Carbohydrates, proteins, excess sugars, structural integrity. I don't think my jaw unhinges like that, Izuku admitted. You just gotta commit, man, Shaggy advised, taking a bite out of a similar, slightly smaller sandwich. He swallowed the bite whole, his neck expanding like a cartoon character. Like that, Izuku's sweat dropped. Is this his quirk? An elasticity quirk centered around the digestive tract? He picked up a fork and knife instead, deciding to dismantle the tower strategically. As he ate, and it was surprisingly delicious, the marshmallows contrasting weirdly well with the pickles, the conversation turned to the news. Anything in the paper, Fred? Velma asked, buttering a piece of toast. Not much, Fred sighed. Mayor Jones, that's my uncle, is cutting the budget for the library again. Oh, and there's a report of strange lights in the sky over the old airfield last night. That was probably me, Izuka said through a mouthful of ham. The portal. Right, Fred nodded. But here's the big one. The malt shop might be closing down. The table went silent. Shaggy dropped his sandwich. Scooby gasped. Daphne, who had just walked in carrying a bag of medical supplies, dropped the bag. The malt shop? Daphne cried. But that's our spot. That's where we celebrate. Why is it closing? Velma asked, frowning. Says here people are scared to go, Fred read. Apparently, there have been sightings of a sludge specter haunting the parking lot, scaring away customers. Old man Anderson says it ruined his strawberry shake. Izuka froze. His fork clattered onto the plate. Sludge? Izuka whispered. The color drained from his face. Did you say sludge? Fred looked at him, concerned. Yeah. Sludge specter. Why? You look like you've seen a ghost. And we've seen a lot of ghosts. Izuka's hands began to tremble. Memories flashed before his eyes. The suffocating feeling of mud forcing its way down his throat. The terror in Bakugo's eyes as he drowned in the villain's grasp. The first time he met All Might. The sludge villain, Izuka muttered, his voice rising in panic. It can't be. He was contained in Tartarus. Unless the portal pulled others through? Or maybe a remnant of his biomass? He stood up so abruptly his chair fell backward. Green sparks crackled around his shoulders. We have to go, Izuka said, his voice hard. Now. If that's a villain, civilians are in extreme danger. It suffocates its victims. It takes their bodies. We need to evacuate the block. The gang stared at him. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Dude, Shaggy squeaked, hiding behind a ketchup bottle. You're glowing again. Izuku, Daphne said, reaching out to touch his arm. Breathe. It's probably just a guy in a suit. That's what it always is. You don't understand. Izuka pulled away, pacing the kitchen. In my world, villains aren't guys in suits. They are murderers. If the sludge villain is here, he'll kill people. We need pro-heroes. We need the police. Where is your phone? He rushed to the wall phone. He picked up the receiver and stared at it. It was a rotary phone. How do I dial this? He asked, panic making him clumsy. Where is the touch screen? It's a rotary, Deku, Fred said, standing up and walking over. He gently took the phone from Izuka's hand and hung it up. Look. You're worked up. I get it. You've been through a lot, but here in Coolsville, we handle things differently. Fred placed his hands on his hips, his chest puffing out. We don't call the police until we've caught the bad guy. We investigate. We look for clues. We set a trap. A trap? Izuka looked at him incredulously. You want to trap a fluid-based villain with, what? A net? Well, I was thinking a net, yeah, Fred admitted. Or maybe a bucket mechanism. Izuka ran a hand through his hair. A bucket. You want to fight a Class B villain with a bucket. It's a really big bucket, Shaggy offered helpfully. Velma stepped in. Izuku, listen. We promise to be careful. But if we go in there screaming about evacuations and death, we'll cause a panic. Let us do it our way first. We check it out. We verify the threat level. If it's really a monster like you say, then we do it your way. Deal? Izuka looked at their faces. They were naive. Painfully, dangerously naive. But they were also brave. They were willing to walk into danger for a milkshake shop. Fine, Izuka exhaled, powering down his quirk. But I take point. And if I say run, you run. No questions. Deal. Fred grinned. Now, to the mystery machine. Gang, let's split up and, wait, we're all here. Let's just go. Part 3. The Mystery Machine vs. The Support Item. Stepping out into the driveway, Izuku got his first good look at the gang's vehicle in the daylight. The mystery machine was vibrant. It's very noticeable, Izuku commented, walking around the van. For a stealth operation vehicle, the color scheme is counterintuitive. Camouflage would be more effective. Camouflage doesn't say groovy, Daphne noted, opening the side doors. Izuku climbed inside. He expected banks of monitors, satellite uplinks, maybe a weapons locker. Instead, he found plush orange bench seats, a shag carpet, a table with a lava lamp bolted to it, and a mini fridge. Where is the communications array? Izuku asked, poking the lava lamp. Shaggy has a walkie-talkie in the glove box, Fred said, sliding into the driver's seat. And Velma has a flashlight that doubles as a magnifying glass. Izuku sat down heavily on the bench. I am in the Stone Age, he whispered to himself. Hey, don't knock the machine, Shaggy said, patting the dashboard. She's got a cassette player, and an 8-track. High fidelity, man. Fred turned the key. The engine roared to life, a healthy, throaty sound that surprised Izuku. I rebuilt the engine myself, Fred said proudly, catching Izuku's look in the rearview mirror. Twin carburetor V8. She can hit 90 if we're going downhill with a tailwind. Izuku's eyes lit up. You did the mechanical work? Do you have an engineering background? Nah, just like tinkering, Fred shrugged. I like knowing how things work. Traps, engines, winches? Fred's a genius with gears, Daphne added. He built a pulley system to hoist Shaggy out of a vat of chocolate last week. It was dark chocolate, Shaggy clarified. Very bitter. Traumatic. Izuku pulled out a small, charred notebook from his pocket. His Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. It was singed from the battle, but still usable. He flipped to a new page and wrote, Fred Jones. Quirkless? High mechanical aptitude. Leadership qualities. Obsession with capture mechanics. What are you writing? Velma asked, peering over his shoulder. Analysis, Izuku said. If we are to work as a team, I need to understand your capabilities. Velma, your quirk is intelligence, correct? High-speed processing? I just read a lot, Izuku, Velma smiled. But if you want to call it a superpower, I won't stop you. And Shaggy and Scooby. Speed? Cowardice, Shaggy corrected. We have mastered the ancient art of running away before the bad guy even shows up. Tactical retreat specialists, Izuku wrote down. And bait potential. Hey! Shaggy protested. And Daphne? Izuku looked at the redhead. Daphne paused. She looked at her manicured nails. Well, I'm good at finding things. And I have a black belt in karate. Izuku stopped writing. You do? My dad made me take lessons, she shrugged. I also know how to pick locks with a hairpin. And I'm usually the one who gets captured, which helps locate the villain's lair? Distraction and infiltration, Izuku nodded, writing furiously. This is a balanced team. Heavy on recon, light on offensive power. I will have to be the DPS. The what now? Fred asked, pulling the van onto the main road. Damage per second, Izuku said. The vanguard. I'll hit the villain. You guys secure the perimeter. We usually just run around until the villain trips over Scooby, Fred said. But sure. Vanguard. Sounds fancy. Part 4, Coolsville Culture Shock. As they drove into the town of Coolsville, Izuku's sense of displacement grew. The town was bright. The buildings were painted in pastels. The cars were massive, chrome-covered boats that rumbled like tanks. There were no holographic billboards. No pro-hero agencies on the corners. No kids running around showing off their quirks in the park. Where are the heroes? Izuku asked, his face pressed against the glass. What do you mean? Daphne asked. The patrol routes. The sidekicks. I haven't seen a single cape. Izuku, Velma said gently. Heroes here are fictional. Comic books. Movies. In the real world, we have police, firefighters, and the occasional meddling kid. Izuku slumped back. A world without All Might. A world without Endeavor, or Best Jeanist, or even Eraserhead. It felt naked. Vulnerable. Who protects you? Izuku asked quietly. When a villain attacks, who saves everyone? We do, Fred said simply. He didn't look back, his eyes on the road. Or the cops. But mostly, people just look out for each other. It's not perfect, but it works. Izuku looked at Fred's back. He didn't have a license. He didn't have a quirk. He was just a guy with an ascot and a van. And yet, he spoke with the same conviction as a top-ranked hero. They are true heroes, Izuku realized. Vigilantes, technically. Illegal, definitely. But heroes. Here we are, Fred announced, pulling into a parking lot. The Malt Shop. Part 5, The Sludge Spectre. The Malt Shop was a retro paradise. Neon lights buzzed in the shape of a giant milkshake. Cars were parked in rows, trays attached to their windows. But the lot was ominously empty. Fred killed the engine. Okay, gang. Standard formation. Shaggy, Scooby, you guys guard the van. Way ahead of you, Fred, Shaggy said, already locking the doors from the inside. Come on, Fred sighed. We need bait. Not it. Shaggy and Scooby shouted in unison. Izuku, Fred turned to the boy. You're the vanguard, right? You stick with me. Daphne, Velma, check the back entrance. They piled out of the van. Izuku took a deep breath. He channeled one for all, letting the energy hum beneath his skin at 2%. Just enough to heighten his reflexes without glowing too noticeably. He scanned the area. Danger sense remained dormant. It's quiet, Izuku whispered. Too quiet, Fred agreed. They walked up to the front door. It was locked. A sign read closed due to ghosts. Subtle, Velma deadpanned. Suddenly, a crashing sound came from the alleyway beside the shop. Metal trash cans clattering against brick. There. Daphne pointed. Ready, Deku? Fred asked, reaching for a net he had pulled from his pocket. Ready, Izuku said. He clenched his fists. If it's the sludge villain, physical attacks won't work unless I generate enough wind pressure to scatter him. I need to aim for the eyes or mouth. They rounded the corner. Standing, or oozing, in the middle of the alley was a figure. It was about 6 feet tall, made of a dripping, grayish-brown muck. Seaweed hung from its shoulders. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow. Roar! The monster bellowed, raising muddy arms. Beware! Leave this place or doom shall befall you, Fred gasped. It's the sludge spectre. Izuku didn't gasp. He didn't hesitate. The moment he saw the sludge, the trauma of the past overrode the logic of the present. He saw the villain that had nearly killed him. He saw the villain that had started everything. Smash! Izuku launched himself forward. He didn't use 100%. He didn't want to destroy the building. He used 5%. He moved faster than the eye could follow, a green streak in the alleyway. Detroit. He closed the distance in a millisecond. The monster didn't even have time to react. Snap! Instead of a punch, Izuku opted for a wind pressure flick, aiming just to the side of the monster's head to disorient it. He snapped his fingers. Boom! The air pressure cannon blasted down the alley. It hit the trash cans, flattening them instantly. It hit the monster. But the monster didn't scatter like liquid. The sludge ripped. There was a sound of tearing rubber, followed by a very human yelp. Ow! Hey! Watch it! The force of the wind knocked the monster off its feet. It flew backward, slamming into a pile of cardboard boxes. The head of the monster, which was clearly a rubber mask, flew off, revealing a bald, angry man underneath. The man groaned, rubbing his back. My lumbar! You crazy kid! You coulda killed me! Izuku froze in midair, landing gracefully on a dumpster. He stared at the man. He's solid, Izuku stammered. He's not sludge. He's the guy. Fred, Daphne, and Velma ran up. Fred looked disappointed. Ah, man! I didn't even get to use the net. Fred complained. Velma walked over to the groaning man and shone her flashlight in his face. Jinkies, Velma said. It's Mr. Gunderson, the owner of the rival ice cream shop across town. Gunderson? Daphne gasped. And I would have gotten away with it, too. Mr. Gunderson yelled, shaking a fist at Izuku. If it weren't for you meddling kids and your nuclear-powered kung fu master. Izuku stood on the dumpster, his hands trembling. The green lightning faded. It was a suit, Izuku whispered, the realization washing over him. It was just a suit. He looked at his hands. He had almost used a smash on a civilian in a rubber costume. If he had connected, if he had used even 10%. Izuku? Daphne called out, sensing his distress. Izuku jumped down. He looked at the gang. They weren't horrified. They were annoyed that the mystery was solved so quickly. He was trying to drive the malt shop out of business so he could buy the property cheap. Velma deduced, pulling a deed out of the costume's pocket, somehow. Typical, Fred shook his head. Well, let's tie him up and call Sheriff Stone. Izuku watched as Fred expertly tied the man up with the net. It was surreal. In his world, this man would be a villain. He would be sent to prison. Here, he was just a grumpy business owner committing fraud. You okay, Deku? Shaggy called out, peeking around the corner with Scooby. Did the ghost eat anyone? No, Izuku said softly. No one got eaten. He looked at the rubber mask lying in a puddle of dirty water. This world, Izuku thought, is ridiculous. But then, he looked at Fred, who was high-fiving Daphne. He looked at Velma, who was lecturing the criminal on real estate law. He looked at Shaggy sharing a celebratory sandwich with Scooby. It's ridiculous, Izuku corrected himself, a small smile touching his lips. But it's also kind of nice. Hey, Deku! Fred waved. Since we solved the mystery in record time, thanks to your, excessive force, drinks are on me. Who wants a chocolate malt? RME. RME. Scooby cheered. Izuku's stomach growled, loudly enough to echo in the alley. I suppose, Izuku said, walking toward them. A malt would be good. Great. Velma beamed. And while we drink, you can tell me exactly how you generated that wind pressure without breaking your phalanges. I need to calculate the tensile strength of your bones. As they walked into the malt shop, the owner unlocking the door and weeping with gratitude, Izuku felt a shift. He wasn't a hero here. He was a mystery solver, and for the first time in a long time, the weight of the world wasn't on his shoulders. Just the weight of a really, really big sandwich. Part 1. Sugar Rush and Strategic Anxiety. The interior of the malt shop was a sensory overload that Izuku Midoriya was entirely unprepared for. In his world, restaurants were generally efficient, modern, or traditionally Japanese. Even the American-themed diners in Musudafu were stylized approximations. But this place? This was the real deal. Or rather, it was a hyperreal, neon-soaked temple to cholesterol and chrome. Checkered black and white tiles stretched across the floor. Booths upholstered in bright red vinyl squeaked as they sat down. A jukebox in the corner bubbled with multicolored lights, playing a tune that sounded like upbeat surf rock. Like Scoot over Scoob, Shaggy said, sliding into the booth. I need elbow room for proper milkshake consumption. Roki, Scooby Doo agreed, hopping up onto the bench next to him. Izuku sat on the opposite side, sandwiched between Fred and the window. He felt small. Everything here was big. The napkin dispensers were big. The ketchup bottles were big. The menu Fred handed him was the size of a small shield. Order whatever you want, Deku, Fred said, loosening his ascot slightly. My treat. It's the least we can do for the guy who saved us from walking a few extra blocks back to town. Thank you, Izuku said, staring at the menu. The colossal burger. The mountain of fries. The diabetic coma sundae. I will have a water. And perhaps a grilled chicken salad? The table went silent. Shaggy stared at him with genuine horror. A salad? Rallad? Scooby gagged. Izuku, Shaggy whispered, leaning across the table as if sharing a state secret. We just fought a monster. We survived a graveyard. This is no time for leafy greens. This is time for grease. It's good for the nerves. He's right, Daphne added, stirring her straw wrapper with a manicured nail. Besides, you said you need 5,000 calories, right? A salad is like negative calories compared to what Shaggy eats. Izuku blinked. Right. Caloric intake. Efficiency. He scanned the menu again, his eyes locking onto the most nutrient-dense item. I'll take the triple-decker cheeseburger with extra bacon, and a chocolate malt. Now you're speaking our language. Fred grinned. As they waited for their food, the atmosphere relaxed. The owner, a balding man named Mr. Withers, was bustling behind the counter, looking frazzled but relieved. He had thanked them profusely for catching Gunderson in the alleyway, though Izuku still felt a nagging sense of unease. Gunderson, Izuku thought, pulling out his notebook. A civilian in a rubber suit. Motive, real estate fraud. Threat level 0. But why did my danger sense trigger so violently before we even saw him? He tapped his pen against the paper. Danger sense usually reacts to malicious intent. Gunderson was just a greedy old man. Was the intent really that strong? Or is there something else? You're doing it again, Velma noted. Izuku jumped. Doing what? Muttering, Velma said, sipping her tea. You enter a fugue state of rapid-fire vocalization. It's quite distinct. Are you analyzing the menu or the structural integrity of the table? The situation, Izuku admitted. He lowered his voice. Does it not seem too easy? We arrived, we found a guy in the alley, we caught him. Case closed. But the rumors said the sludge specter was inside the shop, haunting the plumbing. Gunderson was outside. Maybe he was on a break? Shaggy suggested. Haunting is hard work. Gotta stretch the legs. Or, Fred said, Gunderson was coming out after setting up some rigged effects inside. Perhaps, Izuku conceded. But the hair on the back of his neck refused to settle. The fourth user's quirk was dormant, but it felt like a heavy blanket resting on his consciousness, waiting to be pulled away. The food arrived, interrupting his thoughts. The burger was massive. It was a tower of meat and cheese held together by a steak knife. Itakimasu, Izuku whispered instinctively, clasping his hands. He took a bite. His eyes widened. It was greasy, salty, and incredibly unhealthy. It was delicious. Good, right? Daphne smiled. It's very rich, Izuku managed, wiping his mouth. So, Deku, Fred started, dipping a fry into a puddle of ketchup. Tell us more about this hero school of yours. Do you guys have a football team? Cheerleaders? We have a sports festival, Izuku explained. It's televised nationally. Students fight each other in a tournament to showcase their quirks to prospective agencies. You fight each other? Daphne asked, concerned. Like for real? Yes. It's essential for combat training. Last year, I broke my fingers trying to help a classmate with his emotional trauma during a match. The table went silent again. You broke your fingers? Velma asked slowly. On purpose? It was necessary, Izuku said earnestly. Todoroki-kun was refusing to use his fire side because of his father's abuse. I had to show him that his power was his own. Velma took her glasses off and cleaned them, a nervous tick. Okay. That is a lot of unpack. So, your school is basically a gladiatorial arena mixed with group therapy? I suppose that is one way to interpret it, Izuku nodded. Man, Shaggy shook his head. And I thought gym class was brutal when Coach Hayes made us climb the rope. You guys are intense. It is a dangerous world, Izuku said, his expression darkening slightly. Villains in my world. They don't wear masks to scare people away from real estate. They want to destroy society. They kill. He looked at his hands, scarred and crooked. That's why we have to be strong. To save everyone with a smile. The gang looked at him. For a moment, the goofy, cartoonish atmosphere of the malt shop faded. They saw the soldier beneath the boy. They saw the weight he carried. Well, Fred said softly, raising his malt glass. To saving everyone? To saving everyone, Daphne echoed. To staying alive, Shaggy added. Ramen, Scooby finished. They clinked glasses. Izuku smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that wasn't just the heartburn from the burger. Then, the lights went out. Part 2, The Ooze returns. The darkness was absolute. The neon sign outside flickered and died. The jukebox groaned and wound down into silence. Hey! Mr. Withers shouted from the kitchen. Who blew a fuse? Zoinks! Shaggy's voice came from under the table. I knew it was too good to be true. The burger was too tasty. It was the calm before the storm. Spike! Izuku's head snapped up. Danger sense exploded in his skull like a firework. It wasn't a vague feeling this time. It was sharp, directional, and malicious. Above. Move! Izuku roared. He didn't wait for permission. He grabbed Velma, who was next to him, and dove out of the booth. Fred and Daphne scrambled to the side. Splurt. A massive glob of green, viscous sludge plummeted from the ceiling vent, landing exactly where the table had been a second ago. The impact was heavy, cracking the table in half and splashing corrosive-smelling muck onto the seats. "My burger!" Shaggy wailed from the floor. "Get back!" Izuku ordered, standing up. He adopted a fighting stance, green sparks lighting up the darkness. "It's here." From the vent, more sludge poured out. It defied gravity, pooling on the floor and then rising, coalescing into a shape. It was bigger than the Gunderson costume. Much bigger. It towered over them, a hulking mass of translucent green slime with debris floating inside it. Old cups, spoons, a license plate. 2 glowing yellow eyes opened in the mass. A mouth formed, dripping with ooze. "You thought you could stop the sludge?" The voice gurgled. It sounded wet and multitonal, like bubbles popping in a swamp. "This is my domain." "Jinkies," Velma gasped, adjusting her glasses which were now crooked. That's not a costume." "No zipper," Fred noted, his voice tight. "No seams." Izuku stared at the monster. His heart hammered against his ribs. It looked exactly like the sludge villain. The villain that had almost suffocated him under the bridge. The villain that had taken Bakugo hostage. Is it him? Did he come through the portal too? Analysis, Izuku muttered, forcing his brain to work through the panic. Fluid body. High viscosity. Likely immune to blunt force. Weakness, eyes? Mouth? Or maybe I can scatter him with wind pressure. But in an enclosed space, that could bring the roof down. "Fred!" Daphne yelled. "Do something! Split up!" Fred commanded instinctively. Shaggy, Scooby, distract it. Velma, find the breaker. Daphne, help me flank it. Deku. Fred looked at the glowing boy. Deku, hit it! Right. Izuku engaged full calling, 5%. He launched off the back of a booth, aiming a kick at the monster's head. Smash! His iron soul connected. But instead of an impact, his legs sank into the slime. The sludge instantly clamped around his boot, trapping him. "Gotcha, little hero," the monster sneered. "What?" Izuku gasped. "It's sticky. Denser than the sludge villain." The monster swung a massive arm, slamming Izuku into the counter. Glass jars of maraschino cherries shattered. Izuku rolled, recovering instantly, but his boot was covered in the goop. "It's not just slime," Izuku yelled to the others. "It's adhesive. Don't let it touch you." Zoinks! Adhesive? Shaggy shrieked. He and Scooby were currently running in place on a patch of spilled milkshake, trying to get traction. The monster turned toward them. Fresh meat. "Run, Scoob!" Shaggy and Scooby finally found grip and bolted toward the kitchen. The sludge specter surged after them, moving with terrifying speed for a pile of goop. It slithered over booths and tables, devouring everything in its path. "We have to stop it," Fred said, grabbing a fire extinguisher from the wall. "Velma, theory?" Velma was hiding behind the jukebox, furiously typing on a small calculator. "It's a non-Newtonian fluid. Or a polymer-based gel. If we freeze it, it should become brittle. Or if we heat it, it might lose viscosity. Fire extinguisher is cold," Fred deduced. "Come on, Daff!" Fred charged, spraying a cloud of white CO2 at the monster's back. "Hiss!" The monster roared, part of its back turning frosty and white. It whipped around, lashing out a tentacle that knocked the extinguisher from Fred's hands. Foolish mortal. It raised a massive fist to crush Fred. Black whip! 3 black tendrils of energy shot across the room, wrapping around Fred's waist. With a violent yank, Izuku pulled Fred out of the way just as the slime fist smashed the floor tiles into dust. Fred flew through the air and landed in Izuku's arms. "Thanks, buddy," Fred panted. "That thing is strong." "Too strong for a costume," Izuku said, setting him down. "Fred, we need a plan." "I can't punch it. I'll just get stuck. We need to contain it." "Contain it?" Fred looked around the destroyed shop. His eyes landed on the industrial-sized mixer in the kitchen, visible through the swinging doors. Then he looked at the ceiling fan. Then he looked at the bags of flour in the open pantry. A light bulb practically appeared over his head. "I have a plan," Fred grinned. But we need bait. From the kitchen, a high-pitched scream echoed. Like help! I think we have bait, Daphne said grimly. Part 3, The Scooby Shuffle. In the kitchen, chaos reigned. Shaggy and Scooby were playing a deadly game of tag with the sludge specter. They were utilizing the environment with a mastery that Izuku, peering through the service window, found frankly awe-inspiring. Shaggy slid across the prep table, throwing trays of buns behind him. The monster absorbed the buns, growing slightly larger. It's eating the carbs. Shaggy yelled. It's a carb-loading monster. We're doomed. Scooby opened the freezer door, grabbing a string of sausages. He used them like nunchucks, slapping a tentacle away before eating the weapon. Delicious defense. The monster surged forward, filling the narrow walkway. There was nowhere left to run. Shaggy and Scooby hugged each other, shivering. This is it, Scoob. We're gonna be jello molds. Hey! The monster paused. It turned its eyeless face toward the service window. Izuku stood there, perched on the sill. He whistled. Over here, you overgrown pudding cup! Izuku shouted. He had heard Bakugo use similar insults, though usually with more profanity. The monster growled. The glowing one. I want your power. Come and get it, Izuku challenged. He hopped down into the kitchen. The monster lunged. Izuku used FA gene, building up kinetic energy in his legs. He wasn't going to kick the monster. He was going to use the air pressure to propel himself around the kitchen. He bounced off the walls, a green blur. Left. Right. Ceiling. Floor. The monster lashed out blindly, destroying shelves of spices and pots of soup. Paprika and clam chowder exploded into the air, mixing with the slime. Fred! Now! Izuku yelled. Fred kicked the kitchen doors open. He was holding a massive industrial vacuum cleaner, the kind used for heavy debris, which he had apparently modified in the last 30 seconds with duct tape and a funnel. Suck it up, slimeball! Fred shouted. He flipped the switch. The vacuum roared to life. He thrust the nozzle at the monster. Schlurp. The sludge began to be pulled into the vacuum. The monster shrieked, clutching at the floor tiles. No! I will not be bagged. The monster anchored itself. It was too heavy. The vacuum motor began to whine, smoke pouring from the casing. It's not enough! Fred yelled, struggling to hold the nozzle. Velma! The flour! Velma and Daphne popped up from behind the counter. They each held a 20-pound sack of flour. Eat dust! Daphne cried. They hurled the flour into the air. Izuku saw the play. Flour. Particulates. If the flour mixes with the slime, it will thicken. It will turn into dough. Texas. Smash! Izuku punched the air behind the flour clouds. The wind pressure blasted the white powder directly into the monster's body. The effect was instantaneous. The green slime turned a pale, pasty white. The monster slowed down. Its movements became jerky and stiff. I can't move. The monster groaned. Too starchy. Now, Fred! Izuku yelled. Fred cranked the vacuum to max. But the machine sputtered and died. It's clogged. The dough is too thick. The monster, now a massive blob of angry dough, began to reform. It was shedding the outer layer. It was adapting. Adaptation? Izuku watched with horror. It's shedding its mass to regain mobility. A smaller, faster version of the slime shot out from the dough shell. It ignored Fred. It ignored the girls. It went straight for the weakest link. Shaggy. Zoinks! The slime wrapped around Shaggy's legs, dragging him toward the open back door. Let him go! Izuku screamed. He charged. But the floor was slick with chowder and flour. Izuku slipped. He flailed, his hero instincts screaming. He couldn't reach them in time. I need range. I need Black Whip. No, Black Whip will just pull Shaggy into the slime. I need precision. He saw a tray of unbaked pies on the counter. Project a weapon. Izuku grabbed a banana cream pie. He channeled 20% into his arm. St. Louis. Pie smash! He hurled the pie. It flew like a discus, breaking the sound barrier. Splat! The pie hit the slime monster directly in the face. The sheer force of the impact, combined with the cream filling, blinded the creature, and knocked it backward. It released Shaggy, who scrambled away on all fours. The monster hit the back wall and slid down into a mop bucket. Squelch. It tried to rise, but it was stuck. The bucket was wedged tight around its main mass. Silence fell over the kitchen. The room was destroyed. Flour covered everything like snow. Chowder dripped from the ceiling. Shaggy poked his head up from behind the stove. Did you just save my life with a pie? Izuku stood panting, his arms still extended. It was the only available projectile. That, Shaggy wiped a tear away, was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Part 4. The Unmasking of Logic. The police arrived 10 minutes later. Sheriff Stone, a man with a jawline almost as square as Fred's and a uniform that seemed too tight, strode into the devastated malt shop. All right, what's all the hubbub? The sheriff demanded, hitching up his belt. Mr. Withers said you kids destroyed his kitchen. We saved his kitchen, Daphne corrected, wiping flour from her hair. From that, she pointed to the mop bucket in the corner. The green slime was still writhing, though it seemed to be losing cohesion. A bucket of goop? Sheriff Stone raised an eyebrow. You kids and your pranks. It's not a prank, Sheriff, Fred said, stepping forward. That's the sludge specter. The real one. Gunderson was just a copycat. And who's the green glow stick? The sheriff pointed at Izuku, who was still emitting faint sparks. Transfer student, Velma said quickly. Exchange program. From Chernobyl, Japan, Izuku corrected automatically, then flinched. Right. Japan. Velma glared at him. Fred walked over to the bucket. Now, let's see who this really is. Izuku watched closely. He expected the slime to dissolve, revealing a villain. Or maybe it was a mutation quirk. Fred reached down. He didn't grab the slime. He grabbed the bucket. He shook it violently. Click! A hidden panel on the side of the bucket popped open. The slime suddenly stopped moving. It turned into a puddle of inert green liquid, and sitting in the middle of the puddle, looking wet and miserable, was a very small robotic device. A drone? Izuku gasped. Not just a drone, Velma said, picking it up with a pair of tongs she found. A holographic projection unit with a fluid suspension field generator. And look at the serial number. She wiped the goop off the metal casing. Prop. Of CL Magnus. Magnus? Daphne gasped. You mean Charles Magnus? The tech billionaire who wants to buy the whole block to build a server farm? The very same, Velma nodded. He must have hired Gunderson as a distraction, while using this tech to do the real haunting. He wanted to drive the property value down to zero, so... Izuku stared at the drone. There was no monster. The slime was real, but controlled by this tiny robot? Exactly, Fred said. High-tech effects. Pretty impressive, honestly. Izuku felt a wave of dizziness. In his world, a monster like that would be a biological nightmare. Here? It was a special effect controlled by a greedy billionaire. The logic of this world, Izuku thought, is fundamentally different. Malice exists, but it is banal. It is driven by greed, not ideology. And the methods are technological, not biological. He looked at the destroyed kitchen. He had used one for all. He had panicked. He had treated a remote-controlled toy like a threat-level, dragon disaster. Izuku slumped. I overreacted. Overreacted? Shaggy walked over, putting a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Dude, you saved me from being eaten by a blob. I don't care if it was a robot or a gummy bear. You're a hero in my book. Yeah, Scooby agreed, licking flour off Izuku's shoe. Rero. Izuku looked at them. They were covered in food and grime. They were smiling. Thanks, guys, Izuku smiled weakly. Sheriff Stone scratched his head. So, you're telling me Magnus is behind this? Well, I'll go pick him up. Good work, kids. Though I'm gonna have to write you a ticket for the noise violation. Part 5, The Cliffhanger. Later that night, the gang was back at the garage. They were cleaning up, washing the flour out of their hair. Izuku sat on his cot, staring at the notebook Velma had given him. He was sketching the drone. Technology level in this world is uneven, he wrote. Cars are vintage, but robotics are advanced. Holograms are solid. Physics are suggestible. Hey, Deku, Velma walked over. She looked serious. Yes, Velma? I analyzed the sludge sample from the drone, she said quietly, so the others wouldn't hear. It wasn't just chemical goo. The suspension fluid. It contained traces of the same dimensional radiation I found on your clothes. Izuku froze. What? Magnus didn't build that drone, Velma said, her eyes dark behind her glasses. Or at least, he didn't build the power source. He found it. Or someone gave it to him. Someone gave it to him? The radiation signature matches the portal you fell through, Velma whispered. Izuku, I don't think you're the only thing that came through that rift. Or someone here is tapping into it. Izuku stood up, his fists clenching. The peaceful feeling from earlier evaporated. Riftwalker, Izuku said. Or his employer. If they are here, if they are selling support items to criminals, then the sludge specter was just a test run, Velma finished. Suddenly, the TV in the corner of the garage flickered. It was an old tube TV, usually playing reruns. But now, the screen turned to static. Then, a symbol appeared. A red symbol. It looked like a knight's helmet. A voice, synthesized and deep, cut through the static. Traveler. You who wear the green rabbit ears. I see you. Fred dropped his wrench. Daphne gasped. Shaggy dove under the table. Izuku stared at the screen. He recognized the energy signature. It was the same feeling he had in the alley. You have something that belongs to my master. One for all. Return it, or I will dismantle this world rivet by rivet. The screen exploded. Glass showered the floor. Smoke rose from the ruined TV. Silence filled the garage. Zoinks! Shaggy whispered from the darkness. Who was that? Izuku stepped forward, green lightning flickering violently around his body. His eyes were shadowed, his expression hard. The goofy Deku was gone. The hero was back. That, Izuku said, his voice cold, is a villain. He turned to the gang. And he knows who I am. Fred picked up his wrench, his face setting into a grim line. Well, Fred said. It looks like we have a new mystery. No, Izuku shook his head. This isn't a mystery, Fred. This is a war. Part 1, the morning after the static. The smell of ozone and burnt plastic still hung heavy in the air of the garage-turned headquarters. The shards of the television screen had been swept into a dustpan, but the jagged hole in the drywall behind it served as a grim reminder of the previous night's visitor, the Crimson Knight. Izuku Midoriya sat on his makeshift cot, his knees pulled up to his chest. He was rocking back and forth slightly, a low murmur emanating from him like the hum of an overheating engine. Threat level indeterminate but likely high-end based on energy projection capabilities. Synthesized voice suggests cybernetic enhancement, or full robotic autonomy. Knows about one for all. Implies connection to all for one or Shigaraki. If they track me here, the structural integrity of this wooden building is 0. Civilian casualties probability is 99%. He's doing it again, Daphne whispered, leaning against the side of the mystery machine. I think he's vibrating, Shaggy observed, holding a box of cereal with a shaking hand. Like, is he gonna explode? Because if he explodes, I want to be in the next county. Fred stepped forward, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. He had spent the last 3 hours reinforcing the van's bumper, though against a villain who could blow up a TV remotely. He wasn't sure how much a steel-plated bumper would help. Deku, Fred said, his voice firm but kind. Izuku snapped his head up. His green eyes were wide, rimmed with dark circles. Fred. We have to leave. I have to leave. I can't stay here. The Knight, he said he sees me. If I stay, I'm putting you all in the crossfire. I need to find a cave. Or an abandoned warehouse. Somewhere away from the population density of Coolsville. A cave? Shaggy perked up. Caves are damp. And bats live there. I vote for a hotel. With room service, Izuku, Velma said, swiveling around in her computer chair. Her workstation was a chaotic fortress of old oscilloscopes, maps, and the melted remains of the drone they had found. Running isn't a strategy, it's a delay tactic. This Crimson Knight is tracking your bioelectric signature. If you leave, he'll just follow you. And alone, Without backup, you're vulnerable. But you guys aren't backup. Izuku blurted out, then immediately clapped a hand over his mouth. I didn't mean it like that. You are wonderful people. But you are civilians. You don't have quirks. You don't have licenses. This isn't a guy in a rubber mask trying to commit insurance fraud. This is a killer. Fred crossed his arms, his chest puffing out slightly. The morning sunlight caught his ascot, making it gleam with an almost heroic radiance. We might not have quirks, Deku, Fred said. And sure, most of our bad guys turn out to be disgruntled janitors. But Mystery Incorporated has faced down witch doctors, zombie islands, and phantom viruses. We don't run from a fight. We run during the fight, Shaggy clarified. There's a subtle difference. We're a team, Daphne added, walking over and placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder. And you're part of the team now. We don't abandon our friends. Izuku felt a lump form in his throat. He looked at them, this ragtag group of teenagers and a Great Dane. They were terrifyingly underpowered for the threat they were facing, yet their resolve was solid. It reminded him of Class 1A. It reminded him of Uraraka refusing to let him leave Yae alone. Okay, Izuku whispered. He wiped his eyes with his forearm. Okay. If we're going to do this, if we're going to fight a villain of this caliber, then things have to change. He stood up, the green lightning of one for all flickering faintly around his body, casting long shadows in the garage. His expression shifted from anxious teenager to the hardened look of a successor. We need to train, Izuku declared. I can't give you quirks. But I can make you ready. We have 48 hours before I estimate the night will triangulate our exact position. In that time, I am going to turn Mystery Incorporated into a paramilitary strike force. Shaggy dropped his spoon. A para what now? Zoinks, Scooby whimpered. Training starts in 10 minutes, Izuku said, checking a non-existent watch on his wrist. Meet me at the nearest beach. Where something you don't mind getting destroyed. Part 2, The Beach of Despair. Coolzo Lake had a small, rocky beachfront that was locally known as Old Man Smithers' dumping ground. It was a desolate stretch of sand littered with rusted car parts, old washing machines, driftwood, and tires. To the average person, it was an eyesore. To Izuku Midoriya, it was a canvas. It's perfect, Izuku breathed, staring at a rusted refrigerator half buried in the sand. It's just like Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. It smells like seaweed and regret, Daphne noted, adjusting her purple athletic headband. She was wearing a stylish purple tracksuit. Fred was wearing a white tank top and blue shorts, looking like a swimsuit model. Velma had her usual sweater on, but had swapped her skirt for shorts. Shaggy and Scooby were wearing their normal clothes, but Shaggy had tied a napkin around his neck like a bib. All right, Izuku shouted, standing atop a pile of scrap metal. He blew a whistle he had found in Fred's van. Listen up. The enemy we are facing is faster, stronger, and more ruthless than anything you have encountered. To survive, you need to increase your mobility, your stamina, and your situational awareness. Plus ultra. Plus who now? Shaggy asked. First, we start with conditioning. Izuku pointed to a massive, tractor-sized tire half buried in the mud. Shaggy. Scooby. That tire represents your burden. You must move it to the other side of the beach. That thing? Shaggy laughed nervously. Dude, that thing weighs more than the mystery machine. Can't we just, reason with it? Move it! Izuku commanded, channeling his inner tiger pixie Bob. Shaggy and Scooby looked at each other, sighed, and trudged over to the tire. They put their hands and paws against the rubber and pushed. It didn't budge. Put your backs into it, Izuku encouraged, doing one-arm push-ups on a nearby rock just to burn off excess energy. Impossible! Scooby groaned, his tongue lolling out. It's stuck in the mud, Deku! Shaggy yelled. Physics are against us. Izuku stopped his push-ups. He frowned. He needed to motivate them. How did All Might motivate him? You can become a hero. But Shaggy didn't want to be a hero. Shaggy wanted. Izuku's eyes scanned the beach. He saw Daphne holding the box of Scooby snacks. Daphne-san! Izuku called out. Throw a snack to the finish line. Daphne understood immediately. She wound up like a baseball pitcher. Flying snack incoming. She hurled a Scooby snack. It soared through the air, arcing beautifully over the piles of junk, and landed with a soft thump about 50 yards away. The change was instantaneous. Shaggy's pupils dilated. Scooby's ears perked up so hard they made a swing sound. Smoke began to pour from their nostrils. Snack! They screamed in unison. They didn't just push the tire. They launched it. Their legs became a blur of motion, spinning like cartoon wheels. The tractor tire, defying all laws of friction and mass, shot out of the mud and rolled down the beach at highway speeds, with Shaggy and Scooby sprinting behind it, screaming about caramelized coating. Izuku watched, jaw dropped, his pen hovering over his notebook. Subject, Shaggy Rogers Scooby Doo, he wrote furiously. Quirk, gluttonous overdrive. Under specific conditions, food motivation, subjects demonstrate superhuman strength and velocity capable of rivaling Ida's recipro burst. Duration is short, but output is immense. Incredible, Izuku whispered. If we can weaponize their hunger, they could outrun the Crimson Knight. Next was Fred. Fred, Izuku said, walking over to where the blonde leader was doing casual bicep curls with a rusted drive shaft. Your strength is impressive. But you rely too much on stationary traps. In a high-speed battle, you won't have time to set up a Rube Goldberg machine. But traps are my art, Deku, Fred said earnestly. The anticipation. The mechanism. The snap. We need to make your traps mobile, Izuku insisted. We need to integrate them into your combat style. Can you set a trap while running at full sprint? Fred paused. I've never tried. Try. Izuku pointed to an obstacle course he had set up using old oil drums. Navigate the course. While moving, you must assemble this net launcher I found in your van. Fred looked at the disassembled parts in his hands. He looked at the course. A determined glint entered his blue eyes. Challenge accepted. Fred took off. He vaulted over the first drum. His hands moved with mechanical precision, snapping gears and springs together. He slid under a pipe, screwing in the barrel. He jumped off a car hood, loading the net. As he reached the finish line, he spun around and fired. The net exploded outward, wrapping perfectly around a wooden post. Time, 12 seconds. Izuku shouted. Good. But not good enough. The knight moves instantly. Do it again. 10 seconds. You're a slave driver, Deku. Fred grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. I love it. Then there was Velma and Daphne. I am not doing burpees, Velma stated flatly, sitting on a cooler with her laptop open. My contribution is cerebral. I am currently running a cryptographic algorithm to decrypt the knight's transmission. Physical fitness improves cognitive function by increasing oxygen flow to the brain. Izuku countered, citing a study he read in Volume 8 of Hero Analysis. Velma stared at him. Fine. I will do light calisthenics. But if I drop my glasses, you owe me a new pair. Daphne, surprisingly, was the most athletic. She moved through the junk piles with a gymnast's grace. My dad enrolled me in everything, Daphne explained as she balance-walked across a crane arm. Ballet, fencing, Krav Maga. I just never get to use it because I'm usually the one finding the trapdoors. In this fight, Izuku called up to her, you are the scout. You have the agility to reach high ground. Use it. Don't look for trapdoors. Look for sniper perches. The training continued for hours. The sun beat down on the Coolsville trash beach. Sweat poured. Muscles burned. By noon, Shaggy and Scooby were lying face down in the sand, groaning. I can't feel my legs, Scoob, Shaggy muffled into the sand. I think they fell off. Did they fall off? Check for me. Rant, rove. Scooby wheezed. Izuku stood over them, barely winded. Good first session. Now recovery. We need protein. Carbs. Electrolytes. Finally, Shaggy resurrected himself like a zombie rising from the grave. Food. Part 3. The Ultra Super Shaggy Sandwich, Theory and Practice. They retreated to the back of the mystery machine for lunch. Izuku reached for a protein bar from his utility belt, but Shaggy slapped it out of his hand. Disrespectful, Shaggy said, shaking his head. You drive us like mules, Deku. You break our bodies. But you will not insult our stomachs with compressed sawdust bars. It's scientifically formulated for maximum nutrient absorption. Izuku protested. Science has no place in sandwich making, Shaggy declared. He opened the mini fridge. It was like a portal to a dimension of infinite groceries. Sandwich making is jazz, man. It's so. Izuku watched, fascinated, as Shaggy began to construct lunch. Observe, young Padawan, Shaggy said. He laid down a loaf of French bread, sliced lengthwise.